Hi everyone. So my name's Asim. My history is a bit varied. I've worked in a couple of different places. Started off at the European Space Agency, did banking, freelanced for Google for a bit. And then I joined a company called Essence, which is where I met Jeanette. She was my boss, my PM. I really liked it when she would tell me what to do. So I decided to make it permanent, and then I decided to make it even more permanent. But just pausing for a second, stepping out of the talk, like, what am I doing right now?
Connecting with people.
Connecting with people, exactly right. So you don't know me, you don't know who I am. What I'm doing is I'm telling you kind of personal information about me to connect with the audience. Sorry, was it Joe?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Joe, you knew Joe, so Joe didn't need to tell you any personal information about him. Maybe you already know a lot of personal information about him already. I don't know. But you don't know me. So this is something that I think is something that I do. Is something that a lot of the speakers that I know do when you're talking in front of strangers. Is just start off with just something personal to connect. And it's really good to start off with that because a lot of people decide whether they're going to engage with the talk very, very quickly, right? So yeah, my name is Asim Hussain. Twitter, I'm Joe Ake. My blog is codecraft.tv. I actually work at Microsoft, where I'm something called what's called a cloud developer advocate, which is, if you've never heard that kind of terminology before, we're just kind of a small group of people inside Microsoft. Our team focuses on open source. I'm the JavaScript guy, and then our job is to kind of connect with developers all over the world, speak at conferences, do open source. That's kind of what I do full time as my day job. So yeah, part of my job is speaking. I speak about, depends. I did about 30 plus conferences last year and a bunch of other meetups on the side. So I do a lot of speaking. Microsoft spent a ton of money training me up to be a speaker. They're doing voice coaching, if you can believe it. So I've had kind of quite a lot of training on speaking, and some of the stuff, and in fact some of the slides I'm going to show you are clearly ripped off from the training that I've received. I'm also an instructor on Udemy. Does anybody know Udemy?
Yeah.
Okay, so they added in automatic subtitling earlier on in the year, and so they transcribed my name correctly to awesome. And it's always good to start off with something funny as well, okay? Especially if you're a speaker, professional speaker, you come after a lunch or something, everybody's tired, you just want to start off with something a bit funny. Everybody loves this one, so I throw it in there. So the agenda for this talk, we're going to talk a couple of different things. A bit slow. We're going to talk about what you're going to talk about. That's a question I actually get asked a lot by people who are trying to get into the speaking business. Is like, what should I even talk about? Okay. Oh, I should also say I'm coming at this more broader, I suppose, than just speaking in a corporate environment. Perhaps you want to become a speaker, or you want to do more speak in meetups as well. So I'm going to talk about that as well. So one of the questions I get asked a lot is, what do I even talk about? So I'm going to give you my thoughts on that. How to plan and structure a talk is something that I put a lot of effort into, and I think I've got some tips and tricks and tools for you. How to actually present. How to actually present. I'm going to explain some techniques that I've been taught and I can use. And then we're going to go to some next level stuff. Let's say you want to actually become a more active speaker in the community. What do you need to do? All right, let's get started. So what do you talk about? Now, the advice I give a lot of people, because it's crazy how often I get asked this, is, I know it sounds really cliched, but just talk about what you love, okay? Because when there's a lot of people out there who actually try and talk about things they think other people are interested in, and when they get on stage, you can just tell the passion's not there, it's very lackluster, and then the audience feels it and everybody just fades out. But when somebody can go on stage, and even if it's not really a very good talk, but if they're really passionate about the subject, it comes through and the audience gets excited about it. So number one, just find something that you're really interested in. Trust the fact that if you're interested in it, somebody else is going to be interested in it. And the other thing I kind of get a lot as well, I'm not an expert in the subject. I'm interested in the subject, I'm not an expert in it. I shouldn't really give a talk on it. And I just want to say just how opposite the reality is to this one. I remember when I first started doing course authoring or courseware and teaching online, there was a really famous, two guys actually, who were doing iOS courses. I can't remember the name of the website they were making iOS courses on. They'd already made like 1 million or 2 million by the time I started doing courseware. And what they had done is they just started backpacking around Europe with a camera, and they'd rock up in an Airbnb, set the camera up, and just do like a bit of an iOS training course. Now, the first time they left to start doing that program, they didn't even know how to program at all. Not one line of programming. But what happened was, you've got a bunch of people who didn't even know how to program in the slightest, teaching people how to program iOS devices, and everybody loved it because they were talking to other people who didn't know how to program in the language that people understood. So when you're not an expert in a subject, it's actually really good because then you're going to really talk to the other people in the audience who are not experts in the subject. When I am an expert in a subject and I talk about things I'm an expert at, I often miss such basic things just because I know it so well. Okay, so being not an expert is actually really good. Yeah, so basically, summary, just talk about what you're passionate about. It's number one. And it's called imposter syndrome. I work with a whole bunch of speakers. We've all got imposter syndrome. There's 60 of us. We're all professional speakers. Everybody's got it, right? So don't worry about it and just celebrate it, right? First item, done. Next, planning. So it doesn't matter how you plan and structure a talk. Next slide is going to be clearly ripped off from another company, okay? So these are the people that twice a year we get speaker training from these people. They're really, really good. And there's many different ways you can plan and structure a talk. This is one way that they recommend. You don't have to use this way. I'm going to show you another way as well. And it's really simple and basic. There's an opening. I had an opening for the talk, that thing about Essence and Jeanette. I talked about subject purpose. I gave the agenda. And then I'm going to go through each of the. I did the one on what to choose. And then now I'm doing the one on planning. And at the end, you do main idea and next step. Fairly basic. Maybe you didn't even need to see something like this. But the interesting thing about it is when they teach you how to plan and structure the talk, they give you a sheet of paper that looks like this and tell you to fill it out. Now, if you look very closely on this, the number one item is next steps. And the number two is the main idea. So if I go back a step, it's the ends. Okay, so when you're planning a talk, start with the very, 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 very final thing you're going to say, the last sentence. That's what you want to end up with. Because often when you're doing talks, you kind of just fizzle out. Like you said, you didn't have a time to do the conclusion. That's quite often, it's a really, really common thing. Start with the conclusion and then go backwards. Because then you can end with a bit more of a bang than a whimper. It's kind of what I'm not saying you ended up with a whimper because you ended really well. But yeah, start with the next steps and kind of go backwards. And the very, very last thing, which is really interesting, very, very last thing, is the opening. When you're planning a talk, normally you spend ages figuring out the first kind of slide and the first sentence. When you're doing it the way they teach you, the last thing you work on is the very, very, very first sentence. Because you've done the talk then, so you know you can pull from the entire talk a really good, interesting opening. That's not the only way. Essentially what you want to do is you want to tell a story with your talk. For thousands of years, human beings have taught using the medium of stories. We didn't go to school. We just sat there and listened to stories from the people in the village. That's what you used to do. That's how you passed on information. We're hardwired for it. It's also why we love drama in our lives, because our stories have to have villains and heroes, whereas real life isn't like that. But so this is like another way you can give a story. So you kind of end with the point in the beginning. You have some sort of complicated thing that you need to overcome. So you kind of build up some tension with that. Then you give the resolution, you give the point. That's kind of the arc of a typical story. So tell a story, right? If you don't do the first method. I normally do kind of a mixture of a bunch of different things. So I was going to show you. I usually like start off something like this. I don't know if you've used this tool, but anyways, it's just like a mind map tool. It's a representation of exactly what you saw before. I have the opening, the agendas, and I kind of just start fleshing out my talk this way. But often it doesn't end like this. It's just a really great way to start a talk. Then once you've got the information in this way, then if you can think of a better narrative, a better way of getting your point across, use it, right? Use this as a starting point. Examples. So to summarize, remember the sheet? You saw the summary at the end of each thing? Summarize, yeah? Because people kind of lose focus and you just want to bring them back in to the storyline every now and again, right? So they bring you back into the storyline. So just to summarize, let's start with the end in mind. Okay, when you're giving a talk, the very first thing you should think of is how you're going to end it. And it's okay to start off with one form of structure and end up with something completely different. As long as you're telling a story, as long as you're giving a narrative, that's what's important. And tell a story. Most important thing, tell a story, right? That's what we're trying to do. All right, probably the most interesting part of this talk is the presenting part of this talk, kind of what I'm doing exactly right now. The first thing I want to talk about is nerves. I wish I had the quote. There was a really interesting, not quote, a slide I had before where there was studies done on what people are most afraid of, and number 1 was public speaking, and number 2 was death, right? So, getting up on stage is really scary thing to do. If you told me a couple of years ago this would be my job, I would have laughed in your face, okay? It's a really scary thing to do, and you do get very, very nervous. A lot of the training I had initially was how to get over the nervousness. I'm just going to cover some of the things you do. And I mentor a lot of speakers as well, and I see the same issues with them all the time. So it's very, very nervous to get on stage. So number 1 is practice. It's just simple as that. Practice. Practice tons. People are surprised at how much I actually practice my talks. I don't even practice them as much as my colleague. I've got a colleague called Sarah Drasner, and she practices every single talk 50 times before she gives it. 50 times. I don't even do that. I practice until I'm iterating a talk constantly. If I haven't made any changes for like 3-4 runs, then I know it's done. Okay, but just practice, 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 practice. Think of it like acting. When an actor's kind of preparing for a role, they will practice that role for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks, right? So you practice a lot. And then honestly, the more you practice, the better it gets. The more you practice, the better it gets. And especially if you're very nervous like me, practicing is really good, the way of getting over the nerves. The other one is backups. There's no kind of, these aren't like tech talks we're having right now, but if you're doing a lot of tech talks with coding or a lot of these things, have video backups. Always have video backups, because just to take the pressure off a little bit. I, in fact, have stopped doing live coding talks just because there's just, for various reasons, I just show videos. But if you are going to do kind of live coding, have a backup. It just takes the nerves, takes the edges off a little bit, and if things go wrong, we just play the video. Getting early. A number of times I've kind of gone to a conference and they've just looked at my computer and they've just held up a VGA cable and gone, I don't know what to do. And I'm like, I don't have a USB-C, so I don't know how to jam these two things in together. So if you go early, you can figure stuff out. Because oftentimes when you are speaking in a meetup or a conference or something like that, you've got like minutes to change over, and you don't want to be dealing just before you get on stage with some technical issue. So get in early and kind of check it out. They do have official tech checks at a lot of conferences, time slots where you can go and get your stuff checked out. Another one I hate more than anything is Q&As. I can't handle them. You handle them really well. I had to specifically get training to be able to become more comfortable handling questions. One piece of advice I thought really, really helped me was time box the questions. So when at the end of a talk, I would then say, okay, I have 5 minutes for questions. And then I know this agonizing period of time is going to end in 5 minutes, right? There's some conferences I've gone to where the questions were really just, you're really rubbish at everything, and I'm really intelligent, and here's my thoughts. Okay, it's kind of a lot of what I get at a lot of conferences. And I did again another training outside of Microsoft ages ago to do with nervousness in giving talks. And one of the things they made us do was we each all gave a talk, and we each wrote on a piece of paper privately how nervous we were from 0 to 10. And everybody in the audience wrote on a piece of paper how nervous we looked, 0 to 10. Everybody, I said like 8, and they said like 2. And that was the same story for every single speaker at this training, okay? If you feel like super nervous on stage, it's okay, you don't look it. Okay, you don't look it, you'll be fine. Conversely, if you do see a speaker looking nervous on stage, that means that speaker is probably very, 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 very nervous, and you should be putting extra special effort and attention to be really, really nice to that speaker. Number 1, don't be this guy. Okay, this is not a nice person to be in the like front row on your phone. Honestly, I was taking a picture and tweeting it of the talk, so just a bad timing. But also, don't be this guy, right? This guy's not also a nice guy. At the conference, there's so many pictures that were taken. This entire guy was just like the entire time. So don't be just be supportive of a speaker. It's very nervous when you're on stage, right? You've got to project a little bit of confidence. Okay, it's very, very difficult to do when you're nervous. How do you project confidence? I have a problem with speaking, which I actually had to resolve when I was doing my courseware, because I was doing a lot of recording. I mumble a lot. I don't know if I'm doing it today. I mumble all the time. There's a lot of vocal training and vocal exercises that I do. Some of you might have seen me sitting on the sofa doing some weird things with my mouth just before I stood up. I always do it before I speak. I'm going to teach you all it now, and we're all going to do it. What you have to do is you have to take your tongue, and you've got to roll it around in between your teeth and your lips, jam it right into every corner. Roll it around, one way, 10 times, really ram it in there, right? And then the other way 10 times. And then 8, 8 the other way, then 6, then 4, then 2, then 1, 1, 1, 1. You got a question?
What if you've got braces?
Oh! Well, you've got a very clear enunciation anyway, so you'll be fine. And at the end, you sing Jingle Bells with your mouth closed, as if there was a bee in the back of your throat. So, go on. And you'd be really surprised after that. Even now I can hear a little bit of a difference. You'd be surprised after that. You do speak clearer, and that helps a lot. Makes you feel a lot more confident. Makes me feel a lot more confident anyway. Another thing that I don't really do that much, to be honest with you, but I've got colleagues that really believe in this one, is power moves. I've got one colleague, Simona. She believes in this one. She stands behind the stage and does this for a minute before the talk, and that's it. And she says it helps her feel a lot more confident before she gets out on stage. Try it. See if it helps. Anything that helps is good. Silence is a very good one you can use. Start playing around with it. It's a very, very powerful mechanism. It does, for an instant, kind of get you a lot of attention, and you feel pretty powerful, to be honest with you, on stage. You can feel it. So yeah, these are good tools and techniques you can do to kind of project a bit more confidence. But again, a lot of this stuff is I'm very nervous when I'm speaking, so these are tools and tricks that I've used to get better at this. Connecting. So a large part of giving a good presentation is connecting with the audience, okay? And you've also got to kind of think about, like, who is the audience? Because not everybody's like you. This is, again, something that they gave us as a way of kind of figuring out kind of who you are and what type of people are in your audience. As a type of person, as a type of speaker, I'm classified as evangelist, mainly, and a bit of therapist. I've got colleagues that are way scientists, and I don't really know many people that are Army Sergeant. But essentially, as an evangelist, I'm always good talking about big picture and trying to get you excited about something, and that's what motivates me, and that's what I'll try and motivate you. I'll also bring things personal testimonies, right? There's a talk I do where there's a statistic. I'm not too sure what the number is. I know it's like either 24, 25, 26, 27. It's one of these percentages. It's like I think it's the percentage of websites around the world that are WordPress. It's one of those 4 percentages. So when I'm giving this in a talk, I'll just throw one out there. I don't really care. It's like close enough, right? That's because I'm not very much of a scientist. I don't really care about the details. I'm getting the point across, right? I've got colleagues I told this to, and their jaw dropped on the floor. They're like, how could you possibly give the wrong statistic? So there's people in the audience who are going to be way more scientists. Okay, they're going to want to know details. So you give them details as well. Army Sergeant, what I conclude from that is just summarize. They're the ones who want just clear information, summarize stuff at the end. Yes, your audience is going to be kind of a mixture of these different types of people. So you do all the 4 different things to connect with all 4 different types of people. Another problem I had at the start was with eye contact. Okay, you have to make a lot of eye contact. You have to look at people in the audience, because when you look at somebody making a connection, they're paying you attention, they're not on their phones, and it's a really important thing. So what the training I had, super embarrassing, and I wondered if I'm going to let somebody do it. Joe, come on. All right, this is it. This is the training I had. What you have to do, and it's really amazing what happens. You've got to look, this is the cat in the hat. Okay, it's a children's book. You need to read a sentence. Make sure you memorize it, and just look at somebody's eyes. Just read them and say, the sun did not shine. It was too wet to play. So we sat in that house. Try it out. See what happens. Anyone? Keep on going.
I sat there with Sam. We sat there with 2. And I said how I wish we had something to do.
Did you see when he was well done? Did you notice when you were talking to him, after sentence number 2, he went did you see that? He went a little bit. It's so strange, I can't explain it. When you're looking at people's eyes, they'll just give you a little signal to say, enough now, move on. It's so weird. I think it's human nature or something. And so now you just sit there, and it's not as uncomfortable. As soon as you realise you're not going to be stuck there, like, staring at somebody, and it's just, you just gave it to me right now. And I'm going to move on. It's just an innate thing in human beings. Is that a question? No, pick me. No. Okay, other one, speaker notes. Did you have speaker notes in yours when you were doing?
I did, but they didn't show up.
Yeah. So speaker notes is like a weird thing. It's like some speakers agree with them massively, some people don't agree with them. I'm a big believer in speaker notes. So what are speaker notes? So if you do, I use Keynote. Speaker notes are just these things here. You can have some notes here, and when you're playing, if you've got a dual screen setup like we've got right now, this screen will show here, and this screen will show the text. So it's a good way of having notes. Okay, I'm a believer in speaker notes, but what I would definitely say is use bullet points, not blocks of text. Sometimes you have it when people are using speaker notes and they've written the whole script out, and then they just, all that ends up happening is just end up reading from your screen like the words, that instead of like interacting with the audience, right? If you've got bullet points, then I'm going to read the bullet point and I'm going to connect and interact with the audience, right? So I'm a believer in speaker notes. Sometimes when people don't use speaker notes, what I see is that you just see thick text all the way down the screen, because they end up using the slide as the reminder of what it is they're going to be talking about. The slide should be very, very minimal. Like you had very, very minimal slides. That's exactly how it should be. Very small, not much information on there. They're just like an aid to what's being discussed, right? So speaker notes. Which way am I going? This way. Oh yeah, that's it. So yeah, just with nerves. Practice is probably the most important one of those. Practice, 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 practice. And then your nerves just get less and less and less and less. Confidence, vocal training, power pose, whatever you need to do to get a little bit of confidence. It goes a long way when it's on the stage. And again, practice gives you that. Connect with the audience. Make eye contact. It's really important. Yeah, whatever you can do. Okay, next level shit. Oops. Cannot use that word. Next level stuff. So I was going to talk about, like, we're now a company meetup, and actually this is how I started speaking at things organised by companies I worked at in the past. But like, let's say you want to start speaking at meetups, which is usually what happens. Okay, believe it or not, meetups are desperate for speakers. It's kind of the number one issue that I interact and commune with all the meetup community leaders around London. It's the number one thing people have is like, we're just looking for speakers. We want speakers. Do you have a good speaker? It's constant, right? So meetups are always looking for talks and good speakers. So if there's a meetup, you can find a meetup.com and you think I might be interested in speaking there, just speak to the organizer. It's fine. I run a meetup in London. We ran one yesterday, 2 days ago, yesterday, and we just had 2 people walk up to us afterwards and say, hey, I'd love to give a talk. We're like, yes! Yes, 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 yes. Give you a talk. So yeah, meetups is a great way to start, great way to practice. And then kind of the next level after that is usually conferences. That's what I usually did. I spoke at a bunch of meetups, and I went to a conference. Anybody been to conferences here? Has anybody spoken at a conference? Not yet. It's a great thing to do. It's a great thing to do for many, many different reasons. It's great for your career. Having a video of you speaking at a conference is just, it blows people away. I remember when I was first started doing that, I was contracting. It was game over at that point. As soon as you send a video of yourself speaking at like an Angular conference, they're just fighting over you constantly to see, you know, because you're the Angular guy. So it's really good for your career. And what you typically have to do at conferences is you have to fight to get in. It's not as easy as a meetup. You can't just speak, I want to get in. You've got to fight to get in. And you usually have to submit something called a CFP, a call for paper. It's not there's academic versions of it that are way too complicated. When you're doing web stuff like we're all doing here, I presume, or more funny tech stuff, then it's not as bad. It's quite straightforward. There's a bunch of different sites you can go to. Papercall is a good one. It'll have like a bunch of open CFPs. You can search it. You can find conferences that are in places that you want to visit, and you just submit a few talks to them. So I find a lot of mine just from following conferences on Twitter. They announce a CFP, then you submit it. This is a really good one. It's a new one. They don't even have a good domain for it yet, but it's good. It's very, very good. ASCII Disco, Web Conferences 2018. It's got a good list of them there. And there's this one, comps.tech. So just go. You just submit. Just submit. It's not actually as complicated as what you think. So a CFP is usually pretty simple. Does anybody want to see a CFP? Yeah? Let's do it. Okay, so I just have a very, very simple rule for writing my CFPs, and basically just look like this. I have a bunch of talks that I submit to various conferences. This is my famous talk. I've given this at least 10 times, and they just went nuts over this. I'd give it to a conference, they would fall over themselves to have me speak there. I still don't quite understand. But this is all I would send, just this piece of text, and they said, this is what I want to talk about. So, thought hacking was hard. It's not. It's easy. Right? That's what I call the hook, which is like, you've got to grab their attention with some kind of crazy statement. Hacking is actually quite hard, but I just said, thought hacking was hard. It's not. It's easy. I'm going to show you how. And that's the challenge. You've got to give them the challenge. Yeah? I'm going to show you how to hack. Right? Then you've got to describe a little bit about the talk. So in this episode of CSI, I'd say, I don't know, Hong Kong, wherever I was, I'd say, we'll investigate a series of hacking stories and break them down step by step to see exactly how they did it. So I'm going to explain a little bit about what the talk will be like. And at the very end, you've got to talk about what is the audience person going to walk away knowing, right? So give the benefits. So I'd say by the end, you'll walk away a little bit more scared, and a lot more prepared with some great practices you can apply immediately to your applications, right? That one people love. I think it's because it's short, it's succinct. This is another one I've got, Bottle of the United States, which I love. I find it very difficult to give this talk in the United States. But here's the talk. Trump's tweets move markets. That's the challenge. Trump's tweets move markets. So what if you could create a bot that made stock trades based on those tweets? That's the challenge. What if you could make a trading bot, right? The Planet Money podcast did get in 2017. You can find the bot on Twitter as Botus. They're going to talk about how. In this talk, I'll show you to create your very own Botus using Node, some easily available AI APIs, directed programming, blah, 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 blah. That's the how. I didn't have the benefits at the end of this. So CFPs, you can see they're not actually that complicated. They just need, this is a much longer one, but they just need a little bit more, they're just a little bit of thought. You create one once, you submit it kind of 10 conferences, a few of them bite, and then you get to go flying all over the world, all expenses paid, and for work. Yeah, that's it. That's the CFP. So it's not as hard as you think, but that's basically the process of just creating CFPs and submitting them. And then yeah, the why. Why do you do it? Well, you do it because it's great for your career. Being a good speaker makes you a good persuader. I work at Microsoft. It's a pretty big firm. It can be like moving a behemoth, moving a giant, getting even the slightest change made anywhere. So being a good speaker helps, right? I can help to persuade kind of teams to make big changes. And honestly, you become a bit of an influencer and a bit of a role model, which is kind of nice, really. I'm Pakistani, right? I'm brown, so I go on stage. I'm one of the very, very few people of color that's on stage talking at tech conferences, and I get a lot of people coming up to me afterwards, and they want to connect with me. A lot of my female speakers, they go on stage, and they've really inspired just a large number of other women to go into technology and become speakers themselves. So the more people. If you want more of you in technology, you've kind of got to be on stage representing, right? So that's kind of another reason to do it. Next steps, remember, start with the next steps. So the next steps is, go away. I think it's really easy. Meetups, honestly, you're all technologists. You've all got information in your heads that other people will be very, very interested in hearing. Write down 3 talk ideas. Just write them down. That's all you've got to do is write them down. You saw that CFP. The CFP is not that hard. Submit a CFP somewhere. Right? You'll get in. Maybe. But do it. You have to start somewhere. All right. That's it. Thank you very much. Oh, any questions? Do you have time for questions? Or we have 2 minutes for questions. Yeah? Good, great. Oh, question.
Do you have any advice if, for example, English isn't your first language?
Oh, wow, that's a good question. There are conferences out there that have native languages, but I just spoke at a conference in Ukraine where kind of half the talks are in Ukrainian/Russian, half the talks are in English. There are conferences out there like that. I'd say practice. I'd say there are kind of formats that are probably better if you're not so, especially if you're getting nervous and it's not your first language and things kind of get a bit. You could maybe go for a format that requires a lot less talking. Demos are good for that kind of format because then you're in an environment that you're comfortable with and you're doing code and you can talk about it. The danger with demos is you do lose the contact a little bit. So if you are whatever makes you feel comfortable, do it. So if you're comfortable doing the demo, there's lots of speakers out there that do amazing live demo talks. But do try and remember to look up at the audience every now and again. But find a format that you're comfortable with. I'd say is the best advice.
What if it's not like the audience's first language as well? Like, what if you struggle with the questions? Or?
I have that a lot because I speak all over Europe, especially as well. America, it's easy. Everybody speaks English. Well, not everybody, but a lot of people speak English. But I speak all over Europe, and there's a huge language barrier. I get caught out with it all the time. And then I thought I did a great talk, and then people come up to me afterwards and go, "What did that mean?" I have this talk where you can cover our ears now. I did this talk where I have a statement that says Asim is the shit. And this is good, right? And what I didn't realize is that's a colloquialism that actually not everybody understands. And everybody afterwards was like, "What did you mean when you said you're the shit? I don't understand." So you just have to be, you have to be aware of it and just make sure you just be aware of it, the colloquialisms, and don't use big words that people might not understand. Keep things simple. Yeah.
How important is the originality of your idea when you talk?
Very little, I'd say.
I just remembered if you could repeat the question.
Oh, sorry. So the question is, how important is the originality of the idea? I'd say personally very little, to be honest with you. I think it's one of the things that people, even conferences, say that they want. They want original talks and new topics and things like that. But the reality is, a well-presented talk on just a subject that you're interested in, you're passionate about, is way better than just something new for originality's sake, right? So don't worry too much about being original. I would say you probably do want to think about how to make something interesting to an audience, which isn't necessarily originality. You can take an old idea for a talk, like my hacking talk. Believe it or not, hacking talks are just, no one wants hacking talks in conferences. They hate hacking talks in conferences because we've heard it all before, it's the same stuff. But I gave a non-original talk, but I just came up with a new way of giving it, which was to talk about not just hacking, but like actual real life hacks, and talking through it that way. That's the originality you should probably be thinking of, is a new way of explaining a concept rather than a new concept. But don't worry about it. We good? That's 2 minutes, time up, sorry. We're good. Thank you very much, cheers.